Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Johnny Urnripper from Ghastly, and I do the vocals on albums and guitar and vocals on the live shows, or some of the vocals, I should say.
And how would you describe the music of Ghastly?
Well, we play death metal. It's Finnish death metal. I guess people usually think of it as sort of this weirder scene of death metal, and I guess that also applies to us. And we've been described as psychedelic death metal. I'm not sure if that's a good moniker or not, but we have these surreal lyrics and use a lot of melodies, harmonies. So that creates, I guess, an atmosphere that's a bit different from many other bands these days.
Now, do you agree with that characterization? Do you agree with that description, that Ghastly's music is psychedelic?
Well, I guess I do. Yeah. It's at least one characteristic of the band. We, of course, we have these aggressive parts and more, like I said, melodic parts, and that's a diverse kind of thing.
A lot of atmosphere in your music as well?
Yeah, we have Ian has a way of making music that creates a lot of atmosphere, and he likes to use this reverb in guitar sound and a lot of harmonies and kind of this cavernous echoing sounds, and that's an important part of the Ghastly sound.
So some weeks ago I spoke to two guys who wrote a book about Finnish death metal, and I asked them if they thought that there was a sound to Finnish death metal, if there was a kind of commonality to Finnish death metal bands. What do you think? Is there a Finnish death metal sound?
Well, I think there is a certain kind of sound. It's not very like, how would I say it? It's not a single sound, but you can hear a certain characteristics. I guess there's the atmosphere is one thing. Like a lot of Finnish bands deal with this dark moods and dark sounds, and there's maybe an emphasis on the atmosphere versus aggression and speed and stuff like that. And there's also a lot of bands use melodies and weird melodies also, like Demolish and Amorphis and bands like those.
Now, for you guys, were you very influenced by the old Finnish death metal sound?
Well, I think it has certainly had an influence, and probably more than any other of the classic scenes around. But also we're influenced by some of the newer bands as well, and also stuff outside of death metal. Like, for example, Ian he's a big fan of like Italo horror, and for example, he cited Goblin as one of his influences. So I guess the psychedelic part can also come from there.
So tell me a little bit about what brought the three of you together. How did Ghastly form?
Well, I haven't been there from the beginning, but Ian and Gassy Sam have been. Like, Sam is the other vocalist in the band, the original vocalist, I should say. They've been friends for ages, and they also played together in a doom metal band called Garden of Worm. So, like, Ian is the one who's made all the music for Ghastly. So he wanted to start this death metal project, and he recorded all the instruments, but he needed someone to do the vocals, so he asked Sam to join in. So that was the beginning of the band. And I think like that they recorded at least the first demo tape, but then they added a live drummer called Matthias to the band, and he's with us still. And then I joined a while later, a few years later.
Did you join before that first album?
No, I joined before Death Dweller. I can't actually remember which year it was anymore, but I'm not on the first full-length record, Carrion of Time. But I joined before the recording of Death Dweller, and so I did some vocal parts and some guitar parts there as well.
So what led to you joining?
Well, I came to know the guys from Garden of Worm. Like I play in Stench of Decay as well. So we actually did some shows together, and of course I went to see Garden of Worm a bunch of times, and so I met the guys and became friends with them, and so at some point, like Ian, he wanted a second guitarist, so he asked me to come along, and I said, all right, let's do it.
A second guitarist, not just for live shows, but for the studio as well?
Well, kind of. Well, it's mostly for the live shows, but and actually I didn't record any of the guitar parts on the newest album that's coming out next month, but maybe we've been talking that maybe the next record we would record as a band, but that's not decided yet. But so it was mostly for the live stuff. But then he wanted me to do some vocals as well.
Does Ian record most of the instruments?
Yeah.
The drums, guitars, bass?
Yeah, pretty much everything, yes. So yeah, like I said, I only recorded a few guitar parts or a few songs, I guess, on Death Velour.
And as far as the vocals go, how do your vocals differ from Sam's?
Well, I guess I have a more like a traditional death metal growl, so that's used in some parts, and Sam has the more like kind of black metal type of sound. Well, maybe not typical black metal either, but like this higher pitched sort of raspy shouting. That's really cool.
So you do like the lower end vocals, and he does the higher end?
Yeah. And we used that more on the next album, the Mercurial Passages. So there's more of this vocal interplay there, and I think it ended up really sounding really great.